Hello, lacrosse friends. Welcome once again to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse with Adam Levy and Greg Beecher. I am Steven Stamp, and we're very excited to be back and be live, and we're excited to be appearing on Inside Lacrosse YouTube channel, and we're going to be spreading the word of box lacrosse, and it's a very exciting week. We're going to start looking back at a very exciting week of games, Adam. A whole lot of comebacks and surprises, and wow, what a weekend. Where do you want to start?
Well, it's hard to think about where to start, but I think obviously, or not obviously, but I think one of the games that we can definitely start with is Rochester-Halifax, because boy, were there a ton of goals in that game. A heartbreaker for Rochester, especially now going into Halifax this weekend. But what a game that was.
37 goals, a 19-18 game, and just all kinds of cool stuff happening. You had the Hutchie versus Hutchie face off at the beginning with, or not face off, but the goaltenders facing each other. Riley Hutchcraft for Rochester, Drew Hutchison for Halifax. That didn't last the whole way through as Kevin Orleman came in for Rochester. And I was a little surprised that they didn't go back to Hutchison or to Hutchcraft at one point. What about you?
Well, I think that Orleman has proven himself. He did so in the game that he replaced Hutchcraft. I was at that game, and I'm forgetting who they were playing now. Saskatchewan, when he came in and almost helped them get back into the win column. So they have a lot of faith in him. But I think that I agree with you that if you've got your guy, if he's been given a little bit of a break, I think that you can throw him back in. I also just want to say I will take a little bit of the blame, the announcer's curse. I know that Brendan McDaniels had mentioned my Drew Hutchison stat about how he had saved 17 of 17 shots on goal. And then he went on to let in 3 of the next 5. So I will take the blame for passing that along.
Yeah, Hutchison stopped all 12 of his the shots he faced the week before when he came in the comeback over Albany, right?
Yeah.
And then the first 5 in the game against Rochester, and then things took a decided turn sideways. Kevin Orleman has like a 688 save percentage, by the way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like he's popping off with an 800 save percentage so I don't know. He's 37 goals. I guess we shouldn't focus on the goalies. Let's focus on the offenses, on some of the highlights, some amazing plays. Yeah. And you just see a guy, Connor Fields, scoring. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think Connor Fields he was in the MVP discussion last year. I think he is so much better for that team now because he is so involved. You can see we have mentioned before. Last year, you could see he's decided I've got to shoot. Now he is always looking. He's got that almost Sean Evans, like there's always going to be somebody open. I've got Lanchbury, I've got Waters, I've got Smith, I've got McConvey, all these guys tonight. And he is just integrating himself so well in the offense, and he still gets all those loose balls.
Yeah, and I think that, that might even have come a little bit from the fact that he was shooting so often in the early parts of the season and the ball wasn't finding the back of the net. And we know how capable he is as a all-around player. So it's good that he can kind of fall back upon that skill because it does help that Rochester offense flow.
And what about the end of the game? Obviously, a huge deal. The shot from Clark Peterson that goes in live, I thought that's late. That's not in time. We're going to overtime. They do the review. It was called a goal on the floor, and after the review, they come out and say inconclusive because it was impossible to tell. Watching, the view with the shot clock showing, but the ball's a blur coming across.
Yeah.
How do you tell? And from behind, how do you tell whether the ball was in time? I don't think you can.
I think it was a good inconclusive call because I had even posted a picture on Twitter and the ball, it was going so fast that you couldn't tell where the ball actually was in a freeze frame. You could see it here in the replay. It's so unclear. And so if it was called a goal on the floor, then you got to give it a goal. If it was not a goal, then, it's up to what the referees had originally said. And I think that was kind of a trend of what we saw throughout the weekend in the National Lacrosse League.
What's your gut say? Goal, no goal?
I think it's a goal.
I think so too after watching it a lot, but my initial reaction was no goal, and I do go back and forth a little bit. I love how they put 1/10 of a second back up on the clock to have a face-off, like Rochester wants to go in for that face-off.
Exactly. But I do think that based on what we saw in that one image, I think there's more evidence to say that it probably was more over than it wasn't.
Yeah.
I know it has to be fully across the goal line, but I think that there's more reason to suggest that it was over. But man, what a game that was. But like I said, what a heartbreaker for Rochester, who was really in need of a big win, especially on their home floor.
Speaking of heartbreakers, Albany goes up 8-1, and then wow, just a crazy game with Colorado coming back. Lots of credit to Colorado for that comeback, but boy, that's a tough one for Albany. Who, when you look at it, the number of players they're missing with Colton Watkinson going down, they had Callum Crawford was hurt. Watkinson and Crawford both, I guess, game time decisions. They were scratches. You've got John Wagner out. You've got Jackson Nishimura out. You've got Glenn Clark was saying he had to sign guys this week to have people to be healthy scratches. They didn't have anybody left on the practice roster. Jackson Raposo was playing, and I thought looked like a new player, looked kind of nervous. He's good, but he's going to, like young players, take some time. They've got Cam Pelon. It's the only guy in the practice squad. He's a goalie. They don't need a goalie. So they've signed Carson Moyer, and we're going to get on to the trade later in a different section, but what a crusher.
Yeah, and also now, as of yesterday, Colton Watkinson back on the injured reserve list for Albany. So another tough one for them. Their defense really needs some help back there. The trade, obviously, a very interesting one. Sorry, that's my lovely dog in the background.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that Albany, it was one of those things actually in that game, just quickly, where I was thinking to myself, and I know I had texted you about San Diego goals in the Vancouver game, and I knew at that point, I had a feeling that Vancouver was going to come away and win that one, and San Diego was going to be snake bitten again. I just had that feeling when Colorado was back, was down by 6 or 7. I was like, this just feels like one of those vintage Colorado comebacks, and it happened. It's sometimes you get that sixth sense, and it really felt like, especially in the Loud House, that was just meant to be.
It's funny because I texted somebody as well that we're chatting about the game and how the comeback and everything. I said, at some point it just starts to feel inevitable.
Yeah,
it felt like it was going to happen, which is so strange when the team's had a lead. But Albany has had some tough breaks, obviously the injuries and some of their own doing, the demise of some of their own doing, just not making the plays they want to play. What about, you talk about that Vancouver-San Diego game. Vancouver, a team that hasn't played a ton, haven't got a lot of attention, but boy, they're interesting, and that is, I think, a very good club.
I think they're great. I actually got to speak with Aiden Walsh this week, and he is so happy and proud of the defensive effort from all the guys in front of him, making it easy. He particularly has been extremely excited about the work he's been doing with Vancouver Warriors goalie coach Tyler Richards, who they have a great relationship, and according to Walsh, has helped him move forward in his career a ton. But Walsh definitely really one of those guys like you said, he hasn't played very often. The team hasn't played very often, but he really needs to be in that top 3 of goalie finalists for the year, in my opinion, because he's making the saves. And I think you had said it last time, I think it was Walsh, where he's making enough of the saves now that you didn't expect him to make, and he's really delivering.
He played so well last year, and again, he's young goalies, Chris Origlieri, those guys. You're like, okay, you had a great stretch. The league's going to adjust. How do you adjust back? And Walsh so far doing quite well. You're foreshadowing again, as we're going to have an award section looking at a third of the way through the season, the awards. Any other games from last week that you want to go over, Adam? Buffalo.
Yeah, Toronto Buffalo.
Good.
I mean, just a little bit. Probably, I mean, it was definitely the game of the year so far, but I don't remember a game that had so much action in a regular season game, especially this early into a regular season that this one had. It was incredible. It had the physicality and edge of the rivalry that you want between these two clubs. Toronto, unfortunately, again, and I know I had even tweeted a couple pictures about it, they've gotten some calls to go against them in 3 games in a row now that I'm not saying 2 of them definitely cost them games, but this last one, in the Kyle Buchanan not being called in the crease was definitely a backbreaker when they were on the power play.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and you tweeted that picture out, and it's so hard. Even from that, I think you're probably right. I think he was probably in the crease, but I don't know that is it conclusive.
Well, that's why I zoom all the way in, Stamper, so you get the pixelated image, and then
I know it gets a little crazy. I like somebody replied to one of yours, and it was just a black image.
Yeah,
it was just like I said, I don't know, I can't quite see. Can you zoom in closer? Pretty funny. So it's a fair point, but what a game! And Toronto battling, and boy, I know it's a kind of a low bar, but that's got to be the best 0-5 team in NLL history.
Yeah, I mean, really, we've talked about how Albany really could have been a 4-0 team. Well, Toronto, with the way things have looked the last 3 games, they could easily have won all 3 of those games had certain things gone different ways. So, definitely heartbreaking, and I can only imagine what the mood is like in that locker room with this start.
Oh, I mean, I know they believe, but it is a tough one when you just keep losing. I think we're gonna wrap up the review section of this because we have so much more to come. We're going to do our predictions for next week, and there's 8 games. We have a trade section. We talk about the 2 trades that happened in the last couple of days, and we're looking at an awards section with the 5 kind of key awards. So that will wrap up this section. We're going to have a quick commercial break. For Greg Beecher and Adam Levy, I'm Steven Stamp. Thanks for being with us here on Blue Squatch Productions and Inside the Cross.
Welcome back after the break to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. ITWOBL. Steven Stamp, Adam Levy, Greg Beecher here, breaking down this week's coming games. And we're going to start with our pick'em. We've got 8 games on the docket this weekend, Stamper. It's going to be a full weekend of box lacrosse, including a very rare and unusual Monday night game. So do you want to kick off the picks with the Friday night clash?
Yeah, and this one's really interesting. Vancouver, Ottawa, what a great comeback, a great win for them last week against Georgia. Vancouver, we've just talked about how good they're looking. It's so hard. They both won. It's right. Somebody gave me a tip. The teams that lose the week before seem to come back and win the next week. Teams that win can come back and lose. Both these teams won. I am just going with, and I'm going with your approach of just kind of making my final decision right now. I'm thinking Vancouver because I still think that Callum Jones being out is tough for Ottawa.
I think that Callum Jones' injury is definitely key there. So it is going to be interesting to see, obviously, the addition of Eric Fennell now in the Ottawa Black Bears lineup. How does that change things up? Obviously, again, it's unfortunate that Riley O'Connor is out. So key absences for Ottawa. I'm going to be a bit of an old homer and go Vancouver with this one. I think it's going to be an incredible game, but Vancouver has a tough weekend ahead of them, to say the least. So if they can win on Friday, that takes, I would say, a little bit of the pressure off on a bizarre schedule now where they have a Friday game and a Monday game. I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that time in between, but Vancouver for me.
Rochester, Halifax, I am going to they're so obviously evenly matched in this battle of the old and new Nighthawks. I'm going to take Rochester because I think the most likely occurrence in a home and home week apart is that the teams split.
I'm going to go Halifax only because that barn in Halifax has been rocking. They really feed off that energy. Cody Jamieson back. Give me the Halifax Thunderbirds on this one.
Fair enough. Saskatchewan at Toronto. You can go first on this one, Adam.
Yeah. We were talking about how Toronto's been so close, but I have to be consistent. I've been hyping up the Saskatchewan Rush all season long. I think that they pull this one out. I think it's going to be another really, really close one. But as we've just talked about, great to see the development and progress of the Rock.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big Saskatchewan believer. Actually, the last couple of years, I thought of them as a playoff team, and really, they were so close. I mean, tied in that big group last year. The year before, they would have been in if it went back to the first game of the season when Josh Courier, I thought, fairly clearly scored in overtime, but it was waved off and not counted. And they wound up losing, and that made the difference all those weeks later. So I think Saskatchewan's really good, but I can't pick Toronto to go 0-6. Somebody's going to step up. They've got Challen Rogers back. They've really battled with Buffalo. I'll take the Rock.
You would hope, and just as a quick little nugget here, a rematch of the 2015 NLL Finals.
Yes.
Mark Matthews was on that team for Saskatchewan. Hopefully he's
Yeah.
back in the lineup for Toronto, but it's nice to have one of those old matchups back again, and maybe that does fuel Toronto because they were unfortunately on the wrong side of that one.
Colorado at Albany. I think Colorado is playing very well, showing so much, but I'm going to stick with the teams splitting the home and home and think that Albany comes back. No, you know what? Last time I waffled, I blew it because I had Rochester's big win that I took off the board for myself. But boy, Albany's dealing with some injuries. I'm going to go with the Firewolves. I'll take them.
I have to say that barring that I don't get sick again, I will be at this game in Albany. Very excited to see the Colorado Mammoth in person. I'm going to go with the Colorado Mammoth. Congratulations, by the way, to Pat Coyle on passing Chris Hall for the 9th most coaching wins in NLL history. I think that, the Mammoth defense wasn't great in the beginning of that one, but in the second half, they really shut things down. I think they keep things rolling on the road and take this win.
Philadelphia on the road on Saturday, and they are in Bandit land, and I'm not picking against Buffalo until they lose, so I'll take the Bandits.
I think that that's pretty fair, and it's tough because Philly looks so good. Oh man, you know
Right?
what? Just to be contrarian, I'm gonna go Philadelphia.
Good.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's a good pick. I mean, Philly's good. They've done so much to reconfigure that roster, and it seems to be coming together pretty quickly. I just can't do it, but until somebody beats Buffalo.
I mean, it's amazing.
We should pick against Buffalo every week because we don't think they're going 18-0. They're going to lose at some point, right? So if you just keep picking against them every week, you'll get it right. You can ignore all the time. So we're wrong.
And the similarities just quickly between this Philadelphia Wings team and there's been a lot of reference to the 2008 old Philadelphia Wings squad. They started 6-0, and that team had also one of the top offenses in the league at that time, which Philadelphia only second to the Buffalo Bandits. So I think that there is some kind of really big push, a historical reference there, but I think that they are looking really good. And if there is a team that's going to beat Buffalo, I think Philly can do it.
Okay. Georgia goes to Calgary. I'll go first again because I just think the Swarm bounce back. I think they are playing very well. I think they're going to go and get their 5th win and stay right up around the top of the standings.
Yeah, I think that the Swarm, well, you know what? I'm going to go Calgary on this one only because we've talked
because
about
you've seen
this.
my record in the picks and you're thinking whatever I don't.
Well, I'm more looking at the trend of, we saw this last year as well, where Georgia, they would get streaky. Right now, they're in a bit of this slump, and this happens. Do they bounce back? I think that they very well could, but right now they just seem to have kind of the lapses that snake bit them last season, and I think that Calgary, they need a big win, so I'm going to go Calgary on this one.
Have we gone opposite on every single pick?
Oh, wow. Yeah. How about that?
Well, I'm going to go first then. San Diego. The trade teams that made the trade foreshadowing. We have a trade section coming up. I'm going to take San Diego because I think they'll win.
Yeah, I think San Diego wins in this one. Very interesting. Very interesting, though, that we'll go over the trades in the next section. But that these two teams are facing each other. It'll be interesting to see if both Drew Belgrave and Dylan Watson are suiting up for this one for their new clubs, which would be very interesting. But San Diego wins this one, in my opinion.
Vancouver is at Philadelphia in the Monday nighter. I know a lot of those Wings players are Eagles fans. How much does it take out of them going through the up and down emotion of an NFL division round game the night before? Do they have anything left to face Vancouver? You can pick.
Yeah, I think, again, a game that I will hopefully be at on Monday. Very excited to be at only the 3rd Monday regular season game in NLL history. We don't get a lot of those. First Martin Luther King Day game, so very exciting for that one as well. I think that I'm going to go Philadelphia on this one. I think that the home crowd, we'll see how many people actually show up on a Monday night after a long weekend. But I think that Philly, they look really good. Vancouver, with a very weird travel schedule, I think that they're going to be more bitten by the travels. I know Philly's coming from Buffalo, but I think Philly's going to pull that one out.
Yeah, I'm going to go. That's a tough one to me again. The one thing that happens, I'll tell you, when you said, what are they going to do, the Warriors in between, trips like this often wind up being great bonding experiences for the team. They get to spend more time together than they generally do on the weekend. A lot of times, you travel in, you get together, you have shoot around, lunch, do things, play, then you hang out a bit, but then you're off traveling again. Having that Sunday to just spend the day as a team and do some, I'm sure they're going to get some stuff going. I think it's going to be a really great experience for them, actually. But does that manifest itself on Monday, or does it wait and have a longer term impact? I think I'll go with the Wings for this one as well.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say I think it's the latter of the two as well, that long term, that time will be incredibly beneficial.
Okay. By the way, we missed you last week. It's reminding me because you didn't. Oh my goodness! Don't even look at the records. That's horrifying. I don't know why you even put them up on the screen, Craig. You must hate me. It's great to have you back.
You're still doing better than I am. I will say that is you're definitely still
Low bar,
doing better
my
than
friend.
I am. We let Preston's picks as we went through and copied his, and those were Adam's picks last week. So we could at least see his record.
There was a cool situation last week where had Albany won, Preston would have won Preston's picks. But instead, because I picked Colorado, I actually ended up winning the Lacrosse Classifieds Who You Got with a perfect 7-0 record. So it was a good weekend of picking for the Levi family.
Wow. We don't need to talk about that anymore. We'll move on. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about the trades that have happened in the National Lacrosse League over the last couple of days. For Greg Beecher and Adam Levy, I'm Steven Stamp. This is Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. We'll see you in like a minute. Welcome back to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. See, I should just say ITWOBL. It's a lot easier. I'm Steven Stamp with Adam Levy and Greg Beecher here on Blue Squatch Productions and Inside the Cross. Thanks for being with us. And as promised, as hinted at, as foreshadowed, we are talking about the two big trades. We'll start with the first one, Eric Fennell, whom Albany had acquired in the offseason. They basically, he missed all of last season. They got him from Halifax because Halifax had brought in Dawson Theed, kind of a similar role. I think people thought Fennell would be that grinder, be that open things up for the offense. It just didn't seem to quite click.
Yeah.
And they've sent him to Ottawa, where I think Ottawa's pretty excited to get him in there for a pick. And what do you think?
Well, I think it is interesting, and I know that we had texted about this, Stamper. You've now got a very loaded left side there on the Black Bears offense. So it'll be interesting once O'Connor's healthy and once, you've got all these pieces working, who are they going to go with on a week-to-week basis, or do they keep switching it up? Is this going to be kind of an offense by committee and sacrifice kind of thing? But, Fennell had proven himself in his last year in Halifax as a good player, 29 goals, 23 assists. Can he get back to that? I think that having spoken to Jacob Dunbar this week and his season that he's been having, one of the things that he kept hitting home with me in our conversation was this is completely offensive by committee. And nobody wants to be the guy. He specifically was noting that even Jeff Teat, he said, would rather assist one of his teammates on a goal than score a goal himself. And whether
the guy who's led the league in goals the last 2 years, right? Side note, Jeff Teat also did offer to the coaches that if they needed him to play defense, he'd do it if that was the best thing for the team.
Yeah, and I believe that Jeff loves lacrosse and loves winning enough that he will do whatever it takes. He's been a true leader for that team, and that's why he has the C on his chest. But it's going to be interesting, again, as I said, how they work all those pieces on the left.
Yeah, especially, you'd mentioned before Nathan Grennan hasn't really played a whole lot. I know people were really excited when he came in, especially, because he's a local guy. He scored that one goal from way downtown, but that's all he produced.
Right.
And, you don't have to score to be, you can play that agitator role, and Grennan does a lot of good stuff. But I think Ottawa's just looking for some, still tweaking the chemistry, trying to get it right and make the most of Jeff Teat, because he's, obviously one of the best players in the world. And are they getting everything they could out of Jeff Teat right now? And how do you best support him?
Well, it's funny that we say that because I was looking it up, and he's actually outpacing John Tavares in points throughout this part in his career. So it's funny that we can be like, well, Jeff Teat could be doing more. He's literally doing better than the greatest of all time in points. But also,
the team could be doing more.
That's true. That is true. They actually the lowest in the league in shots on goal per game. So offensively, it would be amazing if Jeff Teat and that offense could more look like Rochester, at least in terms of shots on goal.
Mm-hmm. They've got to bring that together now. Obviously, Riley O'Connor and Connor Kiernan out, huge factors as we've talked about. I think I like Fennell as an addition for them. They don't play at maybe, I don't know if you want to call it frenetic, but the pace that Albany plays at last year was so much about quickness and moving around. Yeah. And Fennell, that's not really his thing. He's not a water bug, Kyle Buchanan type, like flitting all over. He's going to get in there and do the hard work for you. But I think I like the addition for Ottawa. I don't mind for Albany. Now, one of the reasons Albany made this trade is they drafted Carson Moyer and really liked him. Mm-hmm. They had to make a trade to get a veteran D last year. They got Anthony Jochum from Colorado. They had to send Carson Moyer over. Colorado really liked Moyer as well, but this year they get Will Malcolm in, and there's just not really a spot for Moyer, so he gets released. He's a street free agent, and Glenn Clark said he would have been in the mix if they hadn't had to trade him. He would have been in the mix starting this year, so he's going to get a shot. And I know Daryl Gibson coached him in Coburg in MSL and loves him and was really advocating for them to take Moyer. So they got a steal on him at 32nd in the draft because I don't think people knew he was in the draft, partly because I didn't know he was in the draft. That's a big part for them.
And this is going to be interesting to see the development of both Moyer and, look at the work that GM Clark put in, to get Callum Crawford. Last year, Clark won GM of the year in the National Lacrosse League. Do these moves of getting Moyer and Crawford really pay off to the point where you're like, okay, this guy really knows the talent that's going to work for his club?
Yeah. And it's funny, when you look at coaches and GMs, I remember one trade and, I was talking to Glenn Clark about it because they got someone, I think they got Evan Kirk or something. And I said, hey, congratulations. You just became like a 2 goals per game better coach. I mean, it's the players and the coaches will tell you that. You do all the work, you set the systems and you put it into effect. And then the players have to do it. But any last thoughts? Are we going on to the what turned into a bigger trade?
Yeah, let's go on to the next one.
Yeah. So San Diego and Las Vegas, as we talked about earlier, Dylan Watson, who was the 2nd overall pick back in 2022, is sent to the San Diego Seals in exchange for Drew Belgrave and a 2nd rounder in 2027. That's a not insignificant pick because 27 is a great draft, but Belgrave, who's a bit later pick, he's a defender, he's a 28-year-old. It's that's not what you're looking to get back for a guy you picked 2nd overall.
Yeah, and it's very interesting too. I'll actually be speaking with Drew on Friday about the trade. When I had initially texted him, he was not necessarily sure how to feel at the moment. He was the longest tenured San Diego Seal on that roster, but he comes into a team that does need defensive help. Dylan Watson, a former Hill Academy athlete, so Patrick Merrill obviously knows him and knows what he's capable of. So does he feel like his system and his relationship can help this young kid really break out like he was expected to, obviously being drafted 2nd overall?
So one thing that is interesting to me, you look at San Diego, and we've talked about how many lefty forwards they had in camp. They had a ton of guys. They brought Ty Thompson back. He was in camp and didn't stick around then, but they have him back. They were playing Zach Currier and Trent DeChico up front. I think Currier's probably going back out the back door more now, but they have a ton of lefty forwards once again. They still got Kyle Jackson. They've got Ryan Benesh, who's been great. They've got Adam Noakes, DeChico, Thompson. It's just all these lefties. Like, how do you fit them in?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I also feel like it was an important trade, for however the team wanted to look at it. This is the first time in franchise history that the Seals have not scored 10 goals in 3 consecutive games. So they are in a historic franchise slump right now. And, sometimes, when you get new young blood into the team, I think that it's important to shake things up. Say, hey, look, you've got some guy who wants to take your spot up there. So you talk about the amount of lefties. It'll be interesting for sure. But I think that they'll definitely need to figure it out sooner rather than later.
I think for Dylan Watson, an interesting thing, sometimes, players taken he was their first pick, right? Their first draft pick ever.
Yep.
Right. And that's a lot of pressure. And you expect, this guy's going to be the face of the franchise. And that's not really the type of player he is. Dylan Watson's very good.
Mm-hmm.
I think in San Diego, where you've got Benesh and Jackson, some other guys that are going to take on the more spotlight, he can fit perfectly into his role as a really good complementary player. He does a lot of things well on the lacrosse floor. He won't have to be the guy who's remembered as the first pick in franchise history.
And also learning so much from guys who know so much. I know that talking to Jacob Dunbar again, he said that while he didn't play a lot in San Diego, it was the fact that he was just learning every single game, every single practice, to be able to pick the brains of guys like Dobie, Dixon, and others, Berg. It was invaluable to him, and you're seeing it pay off for him. So does that happen for Watson as the years go on, because he gets to play with such incredible offensive guys?
Yeah. What about the addition of Belgrave to the Las Vegas defense? Because I think it's an interesting one. I remember watching Drew Belgrave as a rookie or as a youngster. He was drafted by Toronto, eventually went over to San Diego, where he really got his chance to play. And I remember watching him because I'd seen him play earlier, and he was kind of a right turn guy, where if he got the ball and was running up, he'd just pass it off and head to the bench, take a right turn to the bench. Mm-hmm. And I thought, why are you so shy to go? And that was something they worked on him with, because he just felt like there were all these terrific players, and you could see he was a youngster, but he has developed so well. Both his defensive game and his transition game, where you watch him now and he is so confident, and he's such a steady player, and still has his athleticism, that I think that is a great addition for Vegas.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the again, one of those important things to say. I know he's a little bit older, but it's a young team in Las Vegas, and you need that veteran presence to kind of help things out a little bit. I think it'll be very beneficial for a guy like Landon Kells, who relies on the defense in front of him and is seeing so many shots. Give him a little bit more confidence that he has Belgrave in front of him. So I think it's a move that makes sense. Especially for where both teams stand right now. And I think that Belgrave, whatever he does, statistically speaking, I know he's a well-liked guy within the locker rooms that he's a part of. So I think that's always a win.
Not to harp on this whole, first pick in franchise history, second overall, but it's hard not to look at the trade that was a factor in Dylan Watson's pick, where Las Vegas sent Connor Fields, who was in the MVP talk last year, Riley Hutchcraft, their starting goalie, and Thomas McCombie, the first pick. So they took Thomas McCombie. That is what Vegas sent. And in return, they got Charlie Bertrand, who's retired now. That's a tough one because he was a rising player, but he wasn't in the conversation with those top guys. Yeah. So they get the second. So to flip from first, they go down to second. Could have had McCombie, could have kept Fields. They got a fourth and a sixth rounder back in 2022, not really relevant. And then they get a first in 23, which was Adam Poitras, which is obviously the biggest factor for them, I think. But it's difficult not to look at that trade. And also the fact that they took Watson at 2, and there are guys like Owen Grant, Alex Simmons, Will Johansson, Brett Dobson would be an interesting one, right? Ty Spurts, so many players that have really come on well. So it's tough. And I don't mean to be negative about Dylan Watson. I said, he's a very good player. I just think he was kind of miscast.
That's sorry to jump in here, but my favorite part of the show is when you guys deep dive into that, because hearing that trade perspective from only what I know, which is the players that are playing, and just watching that last game, thinking McCombie might be the best goal scorer on that team at moments, he really is, that just seems so. I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but wow, what were they thinking? Connor Fields, I don't even know what else to say. It just blows my mind. So thanks for all that deep insight, because without that, I would just still have not known. But looking back at it, I'm like, Las Vegas, what were you doing?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's unfortunate for GM Williams that was kind of his first big move in the National Lacrosse League. But, he's now trying to build something better. Also, just as quick update for Las Vegas, when I was at the game in Albany a couple weeks ago, you saw Marshall King working out with the team. He didn't play in that one, but I would imagine that he would be ready this weekend. They have a bye the week after this weekend, so we might get to see a little bit of Marshall King in the offense with Dylan Watson if they both play this weekend. So that will be interesting injection for them.
Nice. Okay, we are going to wrap up that section. There is lots more to come. Not too much. I mean, we're going to be reasonable in our length, but we are going to talk awards. We're a third of the way through the season. We'll talk about who we're thinking at this point for MVP, defender, transition goalie, rookie of the year, and we will be back to that on ITWOBL, on Blue Squatch Productions, and Inside the Cross. I'm Steven Stamp with Greg Beecher and Adam Levy. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse on Blue Squatch Productions and Inside Lacrosse. Steven Stamp, Adam Levy, Greg Beecher, all here. And it is 1/3 of the way through the season. 7 games, 7 weeks of the 21-week season. Not a third of the games, but a third of the calendar time. And we are going to talk awards. So let's talk about, oh my goodness, that's a nice goal. We're going to talk about that. That's why I wanted it. Look at this thing. And it involves some of the people we're going to talk about as MVP contenders. I'm going to start by saying you've got to have Josh Byrne and Dane Smith in there. Again, it's not exciting. It's a little dull to keep going the same guys, but they're just so darn good. And look at this play. Kyle Buchanan, who I feel like was a trendsetter with the opposite side scoring. He'll go backdoor cuts and score on the opposite side, which people are getting into now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can't ever go wrong, at least in the last couple of years, having Byrne and Smith in that MVP talk. I think that their supporting cast, though, has definitely stepped up this year, and that's why the Bandits look so good. Kyle Buchanan, you just mentioned him, has been much improved, I think, this year. He's looked amazing, and he was great last year. So that's been good to see. For me, I'm going to shake things up a little bit, Stamper, and go with Mitch Jones as my MVP winner. And I know that he and Reza Territz, they're not necessarily, although they're pretty close to Josh Byrne and Dane Smith statistically so far this season. The reason I'm going to go with them is because you look at the defense and transition and goaltending of the Buffalo Bandits. They've been up there, so the team is looking especially good because that back end. And not that Philly hasn't been that way, but when you look at their goals against per game, they are 8th in the league in goals against. So that means that the offense has needed to be as good as it has been to be as successful as they have been, making them, to me, more valuable than Byrne and Smith. So I'm going to go with Mitch Jones on this one. You could have thrown in Reza Territz there as well. That Wings offense looks special.
I like Mitch Jones a lot for this. I'll tell you one thing. I mean, I've seen Mitch Jones play a ton, but when I saw him at the tryout camp for Canada's team for the World Championships in July, I guess it was the Canada Day weekend, maybe in St. Catharines, I remember watching him and being down very close to the rink, like right by the boards, and thinking he is bigger than I remembered. Like he just looks so big and strong, and he's so fast for his size. Like he was playing kind of a bang him up role, because I think he saw, I mean, everyone saw Josh Byrne and Jeff Teeter are going to be on that team, and they're going to be the guys carrying the ball, and they're going to be the core. He was almost like saying, I'll do whatever you need. Now, there's Tanner Cook and Shane Jackson. It's just a ridiculously deep pool. So Jones didn't quite make it. He would have fit in beautifully on that team. I think he is just burgeoning. He was great when he started. Of course, he was a transition player at the start. I think Jones is a terrific pick as well, and maybe the guy I'm settling on. So I think I will go Jones for now.
Yeah.
At this point.
And I know that we're trying to keep things condensed, but, you look at Jones and how he came into Philadelphia. Paul Day, in my opinion, does not get the credit he deserves as a general manager. The moves that he has made, you think about Brendan O'Neill, obviously you've got a big switch up. It takes a lot of cojones, as they say, to trade Zach Higgins and get a Nick Demude, who seems to be fitting in really well. He's made some really smart decisions in the GM position, and I think that Mitch Jones is paying off more than they could have ever imagined.
Yeah, I think also having Deacon Knott there as a second goalie, I think he's a terrific young goalie, and that's an interesting option, and they've kept him around. We're going to move on to Defender of the Year. Boy, I'm still a big Matt Hossack guy. I think he's having a fantastic year. I think Robert Hope has been mostly terrific. I feel like someone from San Diego should be in the conversation because their defense has played so well. But who is it? It's such a team defense that Patrick Merrill and
Cam Woods.
Yes, Cam Woods. Great job he's doing. Thank you. I can't believe I flashed on him. But is it Kyle Rubisch? He's playing close to his career standard, or is it Eli Gobrecht? Who I think is one of the overlooked guys, but I don't know. I'm going to go with Hossack for the time being, but this to me is a really hard one.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, shout out to Eli Gobrecht missing half of last season with a broken hand, and to come back the way he did in the second half, and now this season has been really excellent. But I think you're right, Hossack, one of the top defenses around in the National Lacrosse League with the Rush. He and Holden Garland have been phenomenal in front of Frank Scigliano, a really formidable duo there. So I think Hossack is definitely a fair pick. With Robert Hope, it's interesting, and we've had this discussion numerous times, both on this show and elsewhere, about looking at the statistics and is he getting more inflated numbers than others, but his block shots and caused turnovers have been through the roof this year. He is playing phenomenal defense as well.
And I won't count block shots in my considerations because I just think they're dangerous. And we've had that talk before. I just don't like guys intentionally soaking shots because I don't think you've got the gear for it, and it scares me.
Well, I hope that Ian Lord doesn't hear that, because he's sacrificed his body a ton this season.
He's a beauty. Oh my gosh, Ian Lord, he is so good. But guys, Paul Dawson, obviously they'll just go in and take him. That's a whole nother thing. We're going to move on to Transition Player of the Year, and this is one I think it's so hard. Like, is Ian McKay a transition player? He's been playing a lot of forward because he's been fantastic. Like,
so he's listed as a transition player.
If you're on the power play, though, because I was watching the game, he's on the power play. How do you put a transition player out on the power play? It was my main question. I did grab a few of his goals. I'll pull them back up here. But yeah, no, I don't understand from a outsider's perspective how you could be on the power play and still consider it a transition player, because it's not like he's sitting up top on a 5-on-3. I mean, he's in there on the 5-on-4. He's on the point.
Yeah. Well, because he's still playing some defensive shifts and he's still playing defense well, and he's still kind of doing everything. I tend to not think he should be in the transition category, but maybe he should. Maybe that's it. And Zach Currier, is he a transition player? He's been playing a lot of offense. He also has 12 caused turnovers, second most in the league. Like, he still does it. Like, it's incredible. His career in that conversation.
Well, I think that this was a really interesting point that Joey Capito had made when I had him on the Lacrosse Matrix podcast, was that he thinks that it's kind of silly to even have a transition player, because it's really just two-way guys, like we're talking about, guys that can do a little bit offensively and defensively. I think that in terms of the awards, when you're listed as a transition player, I'm sure that those are the guys that are going to be within that category. So putting that into perspective, Currier obviously has been fantastic, but Ian McKay leading the Buffalo Bandits in scoring and doing so much more for that team, obviously having an emotional and sad loss in the family recently. The team has rallied behind him. It seems like everything is kind of happening for Ian McKay right now, and Buffalo and the team is supporting him, and he's stepping up more than he ever has on all areas of the floor, and that's saying a lot for a guy who has done so much for that team.
So let's say no McKay, no Currier. Let's say they're not transition guys. Okay.
All right.
They exercise. Then who is it? I think Matt Gilray is still right there.
Yes.
I think, Gilray's been fantastic again. I think Nick Weiss is a guy that gets overlooked some. He's so good.
Well, how have we not mentioned Owen Grant?
Well, he was next.
Okay.
I was kind of working my way geographically from the guy from the east across. But yeah, Owen Grant, I was going to say the rookie, the sophomore, but he's been fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of guys that could be considered in here. Jake Boudreau also is really good. So Anyone else you want to throw in?
No, Grant probably would have been, if we're not including McKay and Courier, Grant would be my guy. The way that he's injected, really kind of helped to reshape the way that teams play against Vancouver has been incredibly pivotal for that team.
Okay, I'm going to go with Gilray for now, but I McKay, Courier obviously have to be considered. Grant, great one. Let's move on to goalies. And I think this is a hard one because it hasn't really been a year of the goalie. I don't know that anyone's really having a fantastic goal year. Everyone's been kind of up and down. There's some guys doing really well. I mean, Riley Hutchcraft, you could consider. You think of lots of guys. Matt Vince statistically is way ahead of everyone, but he's kind of playing with three goalies the way Buffalo plays defense.
Yeah.
So, it's and there's a little voter fatigue, I think, for Matt Vince. He just wins all the time.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. He's a remarkable athlete, a remarkable player, a remarkable teammate. Maybe Vince has to be the guy. I am going to land, though, on Zach Higgins because he has made such a difference for Ottawa because he's been great. I mean, even in the games they've lost, he's been unbelievable. But the win against Georgia, he kept them in games. The game against San Diego, it was 6-5. It could have been 15-5, right? But he was amazing. I'm going Zach Higgins.
Zach has been absolutely phenomenal. I totally agree. The amount of saves that he makes, the amount of acrobatic saves that he makes, shots in transition on those 1-on-1s has been phenomenal. I'm not going to go with either Vince or Higgins, though. I'm going to go with the guys who I think would be the other two to be considered. I'd say Aiden Walsh or Frank Scigliano have definitely been elite. And I always talk about it, and I'm always consistent. I love a good story. And Aiden Walsh, a young kid who is in one of the most unusual and probably uncomfortable situations with the goalie situation going on and what happens with Christian Del Bianco. But he is playing lights out. He's improved. He really is owning that number one spot. Vancouver with the second best goals against average in the National Lacrosse League right now. He's having some really impressive games. He's been pretty consistent, which is good. You never want to see huge quarters against yourself, which he's avoided a lot of those. So I'm going to go with the young guy, and I think that it's just a continued example of the movement that's going on in Vancouver.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to go with Walsh after 4 games. But yeah, the Del Bianco shadow looming is huge, especially when he is playing right down the road in Langley for the Blackfish. I think it is he's playing
for the Grizzlies.
The Grizzlies in the Arena Lacrosse League. And, I think Walsh, great job for a young goalie it's hard enough being a young goalie, but putting the distractions aside, is very impressive, and he's been solid. So
and also we can isolate this and we can send it out so the world gets really angry at me. But is Christian Del Bianco washed up? He gave up 11 goals in his last Arena Lacrosse League game and lost that game for the Grizzlies.
They've lost a lot of games.
But he did make 55 saves in that one. He was excellent. And of course, I am kidding. Christian is a phenomenal goaltender, but it does complicate things in terms of, we talked about at the beginning of the year, the pieces that you trade. Vancouver's playing well. Calgary's doing better than expected, I think. And, even Cam McLeod has done better than I thought he would. Aiden Walsh, of course. So the development and evolving situation of that trade is so interesting.
Yeah. We have one more category, Rookie of the Year. We've talked about it fairly recently, so I don't think it'll take too long. But I will say Brennan O'Neill is still my guy. I mean, he's done so much, come on so much quicker than we thought he would in terms of how fast he had an impact. And we saw the adjustments as he looked like a bit of a field guy early. He looks like a box player more and more. He's been great, but I'm still huge on Will Johansson. I think he's unbelievable. And to me, Adam Poitras is climbing into this race. He, the defensive game, the cause turnovers, the forecheck, and the scoring, the hat trick, the overtime winner, the overtime winner. Like, boy, he has really been dynamite.
Yeah, he is on pace for 27 caused turnovers and 24 goals, I believe, and he'd only be the second player in NLL history to have 20-plus goals and 25-plus caused turnovers in Jordan McIntosh, actually.
Ooh, intriguing, of course.
Yeah, so Very, very interesting to see that, and he's obviously been great. I think Brennan O'Neill, though, is the guy. The way that he's playing box too, he plays with this fearless nature. I think on the wings, maybe other than Mitch Jones, he or Sam LeClaire, Brennan O'Neill has been in the dirty areas, the way that he's left the floor on diving shot opportunities. He's given up his body. I mean, he's a big boy and I'm sure he can take it, but that's the kind of old school box lacrosse that you love to see. And he's really embracing it. But I just also want to say that Dyson Williams, I know the team's not doing great and he's having a very, for his standard, a quiet rookie season, but a quiet 8 goals and 10 assists, which is second best among rookies. So even though he's not playing up to Dyson Williams standards, he's, playing well. And I think that he's actually, finding his way. I think he's got 7 goals in his last 3 games. So
he's not out of it for the season, but for the third, right. 1/3 of the season, I don't think he's right.
Brennan O'Neill's pulling away with it. But yes, Will Johansson has been great. Unfortunately, the record for Albany doesn't help his case.
No, it does not. We are going to wrap up this section, but we have a bonus segment coming very quick. We will look at whip or flip. What is it? What was it? And what the gash? We're going to take a peek at that as well. For Greg Beecher and Adam Levy, I'm Steven Stamp for ITWOBL here on Blue Squatch and Inside the Cross. We're going to take a quick break and we will be back with our final segment.
Welcome back into Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. Steven Stamp, Adam Levy, Greg Beecher here for you. We are nearing the end of the program, but Stamp and I, as 2 of the heaviest hitters in lacrosse media, are here to break down the Elijah Gash, Zach Belter incident that took the sports world, and I would say even beyond that, by storm with the amount of press it got. Stamper, what do you feel about the incident? First of all, I guess the hit on Chase Fraser and then the fight with Belter.
I think it was a good hit. And I think it was clean. It wasn't, defenseless player, maybe. I felt like it was a good hit. I know from Buffalo's perspective, they're saying, hey, Chase Fraser got an illegal pick call earlier in the game that was, similar or way less. So, and I'm more inclined to say that wasn't an illegal pick than that this is an illegal hit. I think the Belter comes in, stands up for his teammate, which I've always thought, do you need to go and defend your teammate from a clean hit? Well, sure, stand up for your teammate. Fraser wasn't particularly disturbed, but the big thing is, does Elijah Gash, first of all, does he throw a second punch right there? He does. He misses. I think he pulled up right here. He is fired up and he's kind of yelling at Belter, who is, I'm not sure Gash realizes the trouble that Belter is in right there. And you see Challen Rogers and Tyler Hendricks are both saying, settle down, kid. Nick Rose comes over and he does calm down. I get it. It's not a good look to be yelling at the guy that you've knocked down, but you've just made the biggest play. He's played 9 box lacrosse games in the NLL, right? He's played some other box, but he's fired up. He's made a big hit and some guy comes and jumps him and then he wins the fight in 1 punch. The early punches, but the big hit. I get it that he's fired up and you need to learn to maybe moderate a little bit, but I don't want to rip this kid apart for it.
Yeah, look, and I had said it in my 3 up, 3 down, and I didn't want to harp on it. And I would say that, from a general standpoint, I don't think any of us on this program would condone brutality or unnecessary violence on any player. But, I think that you said it very well that, he has great physicality. He showed it in both of those instances, not only in the fight, but in the hit. He's big, he's strong. I do think that the other Rock teammates did handle it well. You even saw Mitch Desnu at the very end saying, okay, calm down. So, I think that that's something that he'll learn. He's still very new and young to the National Lacrosse League, obviously playing in Bandit Land in a very intense game that clearly got the better of him in that moment. But, in terms of the punch, I know that Zach Belter, a very tough guy, and that's the kind of guy you're going to get with Zach Belter. He's one of those guys, a Brandon Robinson type guy, where he's going to be gritty. He's going to do what he needs to make sure that he says to his teammates, hey, I'm here for you. I got your back no matter what. And you need guys like that to be a championship team.
Darius Kilgore had a great point on Facebook, actually, where he said, hey, for any of you people who are dissing Belter for getting knocked out in one punch, he said, forget it. You step up, and people don't get what it takes to step in there and do that. Sometimes you get beat up. It happens.
Yeah.
He's a Darius Kilgore product coming out of Tusky, too. I like Zach. I think he's a good kid. I've talked to him several times. I also think he understands, that's going to happen sometimes. That's what happens. Like you said, and watching it, though, I don't think he realized he was in trouble. Like you said, he's in his own world. He doesn't really hit him with a second punch. He does respond way better to the referees than the incident that happened earlier in the game. So, I mean, if you're looking at it big picture, you really can't knock that kid. I don't think so, at least in my personal opinion. But I'll let you guys go back to the show.
Well, let's go on to whip or flip. I was very excited because I was watching this Buffalo the Buffalo Toronto thing, and Teddy Jenner on the call says that Hogan Antikoke uses the reverse whip. And that's a term that I kind of pioneered that I think should be broad spread. That's a reverse whip. You kind of find yourself backwards to the goalie, you whip it backwards. It's a reverse whip. I think it's a great term. People don't use it. It hasn't caught on. That's okay. Dave Leno did use it when he was calling a Riptide game a couple of years ago. And I was like, hey, you use reverse whip. I don't hear other people use it. He's like, oh, I was watching your game that you called. It was Philadelphia and Toronto game. He was watching that to prepare for the game. And he used reverse whip. And I was like, oh, cool. So it's catching on. I was so excited. And then I got Greg to clip this. And when you listen to it, I don't know if Teddy actually says reverse whip or he says reverse flip.
Strauser. One more Nanticoke. And he tried the reverse flip shot.
Which made me sad.
Well, first of all, Stamper, let's do some journalistic work right now. Do you remember the first time that you used the term?
Oh, no, I do not. I've been using it for a long time.
Okay. Over a decade?
Oh, goodness. Maybe.
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah, let's listen to this, and we'll let you decide. Not you, Adam, although you can have your say, but you, the viewers, everyone watching. Does he say reverse whip or reverse flip?
One more Nanticoke. And he tried the reverse flip shot.
Can't hear it. But the people heard it. So what do the people think? What do you think, Adam?
I don't really remember the call that well, to be honest. But I imagine that I think, having heard Teddy Jenner's broadcast before, I think he would have probably leaned towards whip. But I don't know what he said in that exact instance.
When I heard it, I thought it was flip, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear flip until you messaged me afterwards and you were like, actually maybe, and I was like, I don't know.
There's this show on I forget what channel, it's called Brain Games. It might be on Disney or something, right? And they talk about sound and how once you hear it, you don't unhear it. And I was like, oh man, this is so interesting, what we hear, what we don't hear. Go check out that one at the first episode. I think it was fantastic. But I speaking of journalistic approach, I could have just texted Teddy and asked him, but I wanted to keep it up in the air. So maybe we'll find out the answer for next week. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping that reverse whip is catching on and becomes part of the jargon, because look at it. Look at that play. It's a reverse whip. It's perfect, right?
I mean, it's a beautiful goal, and we talked. I believe it was last
goal. And I'm not talking about the play. I'm talking about the call, Adam.
The call. Yeah, I mean, Teddy did a great job on the call. I think it's an amazing term to be coined by you, Stamper, and so I think it definitely describes the play very well.
You know, another one I did was one of my first announcing gigs was calling Belleville Bulls games in the Ontario Hockey League, and I was doing color commentary, and PK Subban was a rookie for that team.
Oh, wow.
And he used to do this thing where he would do a spin at his blue line, his own blue line. Mm-hmm. It drove his coaches nuts. Such a dangerous play, but it always worked because he's PK Subban, although he was 16 at the time, right? So I dubbed it the Subanian Spinorama, which of course is an homage to the Savardian Spinorama, but I really liked it, and it got picked up. It did go a little bit. So that was pretty fun. So it's fun to coin terms.
Yeah, amazing. I need to all I've done so far, but it's not really my own, is the Levi nugget. And eventually over time, more years in this industry, I'll have some.
There you go. There you go. I think we're going to wrap up. I think that's it for Inside the World of Box Lacrosse for this week. Thanks so much, lacrosse friends, for being with us. For Greg Beecher, for Adam Levy, I am Steven Stamp. Check us out on Blue Squatch Productions. Check us out on Inside the Cross. And we will see you very soon. It's been a lot of fun, and there's so much more to come.
Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate all the support. If you'd like to be able to comment and talk with Steven Stamp and Adam Levy during these live shows, join the Blue Squatch Productions membership on YouTube. This allows you the opportunity to comment during the live shows and access to our Discord, where you can ask questions ahead of time and get real-time responses. Thanks so much, everybody.